be agreed to, and I call the member for Goldstein.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, one of the great privileges of being the member for Goldstein is that you're able to, every time we mention the name, honour the legacy of a suffragette, a woman by the name of Vida Goldstein, who fought for the right of women to be able to vote, to buy property and to enter marriages on the same terms as men. She embodies part of Australia's human rights legacy because she is part of the continuing journey of our great country towards a greater perfection of pursuit of justice, freedom and fairness for all. And of course, this great country has so many legacies that we can be proud of. We were the first country, everybody thinks about New Zealand as the first country that allowed women the right to vote. We were the first country in the world to allow women the right to vote and to stand for Parliament so that you, Deputy Speaker, could reign over us at this very moment. We have a proud legacy of confronting our difficult past for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders and taking pathways to address those past injustices, and nothing could be clearer than the 1967 referendum which allowed for the full recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders as full citizens of this country to be counted in the census. We've continued on that journey every step of the way in making sure we recognise the fullness of everybody's equal dignity and worth. And that doesn't come by accident. It's because we're a country built on the rule of law and a respect for, under the common law, for people's basic rights. And those were the values that were embodied in the establishment of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. If you go back and look at the UDHR and its development, and not many people have done this, but for my sins I have, but how it was ultimately the battleground for the great contest of ideas between collective and individual rights. Stalin and many of the other collectivist countries and Soviet countries wanted a very different declaration that was focused on how to achieve their objectives around collective aspirations at the expense of the individual. But in the end, Western Liberal Democrats won in what was a principled document which founded the pathway for many people's conception of human rights. In fact, people forget that one of the big fights in the development of the UDHR in 1948 was over the concept of free speech. And you had the Soviet countries that wanted to shut down any form of speech which merely offended some sections of the community. And it was Western liberal democracies who stood up, particularly Australia, and we have a notable history in this, in standing up for the importance of free speech as a cornerstone of people's individual dignity because it's a manifestation of people's freedom of conscience. Sadly, in subsequent treaties, particularly the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which became the foundation for many laws that continue on to this day, Stalin won the argument and liberal democracies didn't. And if you go back and compare the histories of the two documents, you can read that. Critically, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights understood that one of the most foundational principles of liberalism and liberal democratic rights itself was property rights, and how important that was. But again, when it got to the ICCPR, it was eradicated from that discussion. And when you eradicate that legacy of liberal democratic values and what it means for people, free people, about the idea of equal dignity and worth in the pursuit of happiness, you erase so much of the dignity that people enjoy. And that's how we end up in modern-day human rights abuses as much as the atrocities of the past. And I heard the previous speaker rightly talk about what is being done to the Uyghurs in China, and he deserves commendation for doing so. Of course, it doesn't sit in isolation. The idea of dignity and individual empowerment sits at the heart of the right of people to self-determine, whether it be Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders here or the people of Hong Kong as well. Or for people to be able to live out their full expression of their individual worth. And we see that under threat in any government on earth that imposes religious fundamentalism that prioritises the collective religious aspirations over people's individual dignity. And the people who suffer are those often most marginalised or disempowered, whether it be women, homosexuals or other religious minorities who equally have a right to be able to live out their life with dignity and purpose. On Human Rights Day, we celebrate our achievements as a country as one that continues towards a greater sense of perfection for human rights. but we should never allow it to turn a blind eye to the challenges we face today and the call and aspiration for others around the world. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
I thank the member for Goldstein.